a sit-down type of person. So my name is Mason Donovan. I am running for state senate, and it's for District 7, and there's a lot of district numbers up here, so I'll tell you what that includes. It's 10 towns and cities. So it's Laconia and Franklin, and for the 2 cities, and then for the towns, it's Guilford and Belmont and Northfield and Canterbury and Boscawen and Salisbury and Andover and right here in Webster. And it's right here in Webster in which my husband and I spent 10 years of our time really enjoying our time here, in which I started to get involved in New Hampshire politics. I started volunteering for town committees and going on there, and there was one night in which I was invited to just have a quiet talk. And found out that when I showed up there was a bunch of people there, and it was what they called a persuasion meeting, and it was to persuade me to run for a select board. It's something I didn't even think of. So it worked, and I ran for select board, and I had the pleasure and honor to serve on the select board in Webster with Roy Fanjoy, who was back there, was one of my select board members as well. And you know, I grew up on one of 8 children. In an Irish Catholic family. We had a scrap to get by, just meeting bills month to month, like many of the people here in New Hampshire. And we knew, and that the only way that we could fulfill the dreams that every parent has, and that dream is for their children to do better than them. The only way we could do that was through education. And we had an amazing public school education, our primary and our secondary. And it reminds me of a name of nobody that's up here, but a name that comes up is Mrs. Mahoney. She's my first grade teacher. Does anybody here remember the first grade teacher? Their name. It's amazing, like how many of us do. After 49 years on this earth, I remember somebody taught me when I was 7 years old. Think about how an indelible mark our education makes on us and forms us as individuals, and how that affects our community as a whole. And I will always remember, and there's lots of teachers I remember along the way, but she was my first teacher that I just held on to. And it feels good, and it's what I think about when I am going out there and talking to people in the community and engaging. I think about, what would Mrs. Mahoney do? She was amazing, and we have so many teachers and such a great community here. I look forward to talking with all my fine colleagues at this table about the challenges we have, but also the opportunities we have, and because there are. And if we can focus on those opportunities, there's so much more than the challenges, and we can collectively get together as a community and make them strong. So thank you. I would second that, Andrew, as well. And Andrew should be noted. Andrew, I don't think you mentioned, but you were on the Claremont case in the very beginning, right?
I organized.
You organized it, so quite a bit of wealth of knowledge up here. One thing that the Claremont case was centered around was our constitutional right for an adequate and fair education, right? So what I would defend is that we never take that out, because there has been talk to take out that, so there is not a constitutional right in New Hampshire for education, for adequate education. And there's been fight, and there's been people that have stood up and said they want to remove that. Because what that does is it allows them to they don't have to then have the responsibility to provide for education, responsibility to provide for a community. So that's something that I would stand up and fight for, that we keep that as a right and not a privilege. Think about that, what it means between a right and a privilege to an adequate education, and what that means to our state, and what that means to our community. Now, there's a lot of challenges there that we're fighting now, and those challenges are on sustainable funding, and those challenges are on the quality of education, but those challenges we can meet, and we can fix. And when we get together and we talk, we can create opportunities that we can seize upon about that, but only if we keep that constitutional right to education and not allow it to go and become a privilege. It's what the school choice voucher really is. It's a subsidy for the rich. Name one private school that you can go to that you can afford $3,600. So what they do is they give you what they would give to the public school, they would give to the parent to provide to a private school. So if you are below income, you can't go to a private school on $3,600. But if you're already sending your kid there, and you have the money, and you have the wealth to send your kid over there, guess what? You just got a subsidy. We just took that $3,600 there. We looked at just this district, so District 7, the towns I mentioned before, it would have been a $6 million hit. Conservative, $6 million hit here. Guess who would have paid that? All of you and me. That means that if they took $6 million out of our public school, we still have the buildings to pay for, we still have the bonds to pay for, we still have the buses and the teachers to pay for. Where do we get that money? We get that money by raising your property tax. Property tax have risen 58% since 1999 on average. Some towns much higher. It would have been through the roof. It would have been the single biggest tax hike you would have seen since you lived here, regardless of how long you've lived here in New Hampshire. It's frankly, very simply, a subsidy for the rich. That's what it is. It's not school choice. It's really the choice to subsidize those who already have the funds and the choice to tax you for it. One of the things I love about running is the ideas that I'm getting. And I really enjoyed forums like this, but also knocking on doors and talking to people because, you know, we're all Democrats here, but I believe very strongly that no one party has a monopoly of good ideas. There is a lot of good ideas out there. We just haven't been talking and sharing and having these discussions. So I love these let's talk discussions. And this is the first time I heard about the idea of doing the 35% depending on property value. I think it's a great idea to explore. A few things I've kind of tossed out there as well is one, get us on 2-year budgets. The schools should be on 2-year budgets, not annual budgets, just like the state is. Because what's happening is like towns like Franklin, who have run a $1 million deficit, education deficit for 3 years running, how do they balance their budget? They fire teachers every year to balance their budget. Think if you're a teacher, and every year you don't know if you're gonna have a job, depending on where the budget is. At least a 2-year budget will give some stability to teachers. It would also give some tax stability for the property taxpayers. You'll know what 50% of your property tax is going to be, what that rate is going to be. So put that on there. Second, we have a lot of troubled school systems out there. We have 167 school districts in New Hampshire. Yes, we need to start looking at smart ways of combining them and looking at that as well. But also, let's create some financial advisors that go out, that are run by the state, maybe it's a state and private partnership, and go to those troubled school systems and looking at creating a realistic 10-year plan, one and which it is realistic and it works for those 2 years, and it looks at keeping teachers and teachers' salary and their pensions and a quality school system in place. So that's another idea, and forums like this, even after the election, keep having these discussions, because that's what we need to do. We can't stop talking after this. So, thank you. I'm gonna make this a quick and easy answer. You're in the right place, because this is where we vote in Webster, right? And you're looking at the right people right now. That's what's gonna change it. Who you vote for on the primary on Tuesday, and then who you vote for on November 6th. That will determine who you have appointed. That will determine how the state goes. There is no other choice. That's your choice. And voting is one way, but you want to get out there and get involved. Any one of us would love to have you there, holding signs, knocking on doors, calling people. It's that important. We all get paid on this side $100 a year. We're giving up a half a year of our time to work full time, not because we want to get rich or powerful. That doesn't happen from these positions, but it's because we are passionate about what we need to do for the community and what we need to do for education. So the easy choice is right here, and it's on November 6th and the primary next Tuesday. So is it possible? Yes. It obviously is possible. It's something that we need to look into. We gotta, so often we think of knowledge as a dangerous thing, and we're here talking about education, and the knowledge of opening up your mind to other possibilities, and other potentials, other pathways. What worked 100 years ago, it's a good chance, or it's a possibility that it might not work today, right? So what was working in New Hampshire 50 years ago, we're very different. But if we start looking at the challenges that we have today, it's been talked about here at the table about, we're losing students. Really our taxes and our property taxes have been going up at the same time while student population is going down. And we have to look at a sustainable way of paying for our education. Right now, what we have is not sustainable. People cannot afford, especially as we become an older population in New Hampshire that are on fixed incomes, you cannot afford a 58% increase in taxes that we've had since 1999. And it's only going to increase, especially if we start passing bills like SB 193 and school choice. That will break the back of so many people. And it's sad when I'm knocking on doors and I'm talking to people that I have older people that are coming to me and say, I have to sell my home, my family home. And it just brings tears to your eyes because they can't afford a property tax. So yes, it is possible. It's something we need to look at, open the doors and look at everything and all potential, because we need to make this work not just for a small sector of our population, but for everyone. So I'm gonna start this end this like I started standing up as well. Thank you for the Webster Democratic Committee setting this up, for you attending, for all of my colleagues here at the dais, for running. It's a learning and it's a great journey. And I can tell you, I started off in my first question talking about what would I cherish and what would I stand up for. And I talked about the constitutional right for us to have a fair and adequate and equitable education. There is something out there where you are legally required to do something or something that is morally right to do. And I had to, sometimes that's not always in your best interest, but it might be in the best interest of the community. I made that decision in this building where it was a very difficult decision. Now, as a select board member, you're legally required to give up that spot if you move out of it at the time. The moment that my husband and I decided to move and go in Boston, after I've been a select board member for about 2 years, I was not, even though we put our house up for sale and we made a decision to move to Boston, another part of the district, we were not legally required. I was not legally required to give that position, but it was morally right. As we think about our education, as we think about what we do and the decisions that we make in Concord, there's things that we are legally required to do and things that we morally should do. And those decisions look towards your candidates that have a history of making morally right decisions. Ones that you want to be your neighbor. Ones that you want to stand up for your children even if they don't have children. The ones that will be there when you're in time of need, as well as you will be there in time of their need. We cannot be a nanny state. But we absolutely should be a neighborly state. We should be there for each other when we need to and be independent and provide and give back when we can. So as we look towards the election, again, let's look towards those who have a history of making morally right decisions and have that backbone. And again, I'm going to bring it right back to closing off to where I said my first grade teacher, Mrs. Mahoney. A lot of times I ask myself, what would Miss Mahoney do? And she would always go towards what's morally right thing to do. So thank you for my education on that, and thank you.